visual cultures and way of looking at everything we see nowadays visually, I picked up some memes in order to connect with your generation, because you use a lot of them. And the important thing is that we, as those to whom the message is conveyed to, understand things differently. For example, if you would look at this one, you would see only the text. I don't know if you would appreciate the image or if you would connect to the image as such. Or maybe the second one, I don't know if you would think of the image more than in terms of, oh, this is Leonardo DiCaprio. For example, my students would immediately recognize him as the Great Gatsby because they are studying English literature. Their major is in literature, so they would think of that, oh, that is Gatsby. You know, you as future designers, you would probably appreciate the text being up and down, and I don't know, the face round to make the picture complete. And I particularly like the last one, the early Facebook, because, you know, as human beings, we always had this desire to write things, to share things. Even hundreds and millions years ago, when we were in caves and we didn't particularly communicate with someone, we wanted to leave some traces. You know, nowadays, if you pay attention to kids, they don't know much about visual culture or anything, but they would write on the hands, I love her, or she loves me, or A plus M means love. You know, these are things that they didn't learn anywhere. It's just the human being desire to share, whether in texts or in pictures, which is great nowadays that all of them are combined in these memes. So visual culture is about anything visual, but also about short texts that you can add, and thus you can change the meaning of the picture. You can use a picture, I don't know, for advertising or for just sending a message to your mom telling everything's great. And you add the text, which gives another sense and another interpretation. So the things to remember is that this visual thinking is just the awareness that everything we see in terms of pictures, movies, visuals are conveying a message, are sending us a message. And the term visual literacy means interpreting and creating visual images. You deal with creating those visual images. My students deal with interpreting those visual images. And if you think of that in terms of communication, it's like in a dialogue. You know, there is someone who's talking to someone who's listening. So the creator conveys a message through a channel that may be the language, the picture, I don't know, the advertising, anything. And it depends a lot on those two involved in that process. It depends on me as a creator, what was my intention to transmit, and it depends on the target group what are their cultural background, how they can relate to the image, because different images are interpreted by different people in different ways. It's like a good book. You know, I may like it, you may not. It depends a lot. And this visual literacy, it has a lot of connected ideas that we should probably talk about. It may be media, it may be ethics, it deals with the needs of the message and of the target group, how we find the correct image, what we want to transmit, how we interpret, and everything goes together. I would like to show you some pictures, and then I will explain why I chose each of these pictures. So if you want to choose one, just say what you see, what is the point of it. Do you recognize all of them? You recognize the first one, this one. Okay.
Ooh, I also want to mention, so for the first one, you can tell the difference between each country, because on one side it's just barren land and there's hardly any buildings, and on the other side it's super populated, there's a bunch of cars, and so it kind of shows the contrast that, you know, Tijuana is a very populated city. So yeah.
And we want to be near them, but they don't want to be near us.
Okay.
Good point.
Every picture goes political, so you can use everything in politics. So you recognize the first one.
The picture below that one is 9/11.
Yeah.
It is.
Great.
Oh, wow.
What about those two?
First one is like parade of the.
Sorry?
It's like a parade of something like the commemorative of French Revolution or something like that.
Maybe.
Yes. It may be put like that. I will explain shortly. But it's France. Yes, it's France.
I don't know why I think the middle one is something related to Romania. I don't know why. Looks like
I will explain why in a moment. It's right. It's related to Romania.
Yes. Like the decorations.
Yes.
Oh, it's so intricate, and how you're Romanian. You're telling us a lot about Romania. Yes.
Any other ideas? Do you recognize the cat?
No.
No. So you don't use Hangouts on Gmail.
No.
No, we don't.
That's a pity. Okay then. So I use the first picture with my master degree students who never recognize it being US and Mexico because they live in Romania. So when I was thinking about my course here, I told myself I need to put it. Everyone would recognize it, and I was right. And I teach them exactly what you said, the vertical juxtaposition of images and how it was selected. And of course, the political issue, because it began to be very popular once it was published by a famous newspaper, like an added image to an article saying about Trump constructing that wall, that very wall. I don't know, is there any wall? Has it been constructed?
Not really. We've had a wall here for a long time, but it's been there since forever. It's been there way before Donald Trump came into presidency.
It's not the wall that he promised, like that concrete.
Yeah.
I don't know how many feet tall.
They did
No.
make it bigger though. They
They
did.
I
did
think
make
they, I
it
think they
bigger.
raised it.
You know, we used to see the other side. Now there's only like bars, like blocking.
I don't know if you know the story of the Berlin Wall constructed during the after the Second World War, and
Germany.
in Germany, yes, and it went through the city, through buildings. Just at some point they decided how to split Berlin between
Separate families.
English, Americans, Russian, etc. And they constructed the wall, and who had time to run away ran, who didn't just died there. And in '89, when they decided to reunite, there was two Germanys. It was a big celebration at that wall. They just sorry?
They tore it down.
Yes, and now they make money of it because you can visit. When you go to Berlin, you would like to visit the wall, so
Yeah.
you would go there and
They
pay some
also
money.
sell it, the small
Yes.
pieces of the wall.
Yes, yes, they do that.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I remember hearing a news story about how they actually took a large piece of the Berlin Wall and they inscribed a letter to Donald Trump and they sent it to the White House, but they
Really?
denied it. And I don't remember what they did with it, but it was huge. It was a letter about how it didn't really work for Berlin and tried to send that message. But I don't know what they did with it.
It's in a museum or something.
Yeah, I think it's probably on display somewhere. But yeah, that was interesting.
Well, I don't want to be mean, but I doubt Donald Trump knows where Germany is on the map. So, the second one is actually the National Day of France, July 14th. So yes, they do celebrate their republic, you may say so. And this is the famous boulevard in the world, Champs-Élysées.
We were thinking for a little bit that it was Mexico, but it is very clean. So yeah. Because in Mexico City, there are some places that look kind of like that, but dirty.
Yeah, but it's
Well, it's very clean in the picture because it's July 14th and they clear the streets 2 days ahead for the military parade and so on. And they used to have great celebration on Champs-Élysées on New Year Eve, sorry. But they are having some troubles nowadays in France with different political parties. So it is probably worse than Mexico now because they go and
Oh, yeah.
destroy everything.
The yellow vest movement and
Yes,
all the
green,
struggle.
green vest.
Green vest.
Green
Yeah.
vest movement. Yes, so this is a National Day parade. It's an image that I don't know, probably every European would recognize, and the boulevard. So we are getting far away from your own perception. This one became popular because it was on news everywhere, all around the world. And this was the time when media conquered it all, and when we passed through, there was 45 to 50 minutes of news a day to 24/7 news channels.
Like CNN.
Exactly, which before 2000, you would just watch some news in the evening from 7 to 8 and that's it. Nowadays we have a lot of news and anything happens anywhere in the world in 5 minutes is on news. So what I think is much more difficult for you than for us, because our generation is accustomed with verifying things, trusting books. You know, you grew up only with your telephones and tablets. I see my kids. I have lots of books in the house. This is my profession, what can I say? And they are useless to them. They look for information only on their phone. They don't even use tablets anymore. They are, yes, only with the mobile phone. So for this kind of people, those 24/7 news are representing a little bit of danger as well, because when you relate only to newsfeed and it is adjusted to your preferences, because all markets do that, you'll never know anything else because it won't pop up in your newsfeed. You'll just have to read it somewhere else. And the last picture comes from Romania, of course, and you correctly decided that upon context, the context is very important when interpreting things. You supposed that I would add something from Romania. It wasn't very familiar to you, so you thought, oh, that should be something very peculiar that you want to show us. Those eggs, we are painting them for Easter. It's a tradition in Romania to paint eggs with honey cellar, and you just color them, and the painting would remain white. But you know, in this global world that we are living in, this tradition is dying little by little in Romania as well. For example, February 24, today is February 24, because I'm also a bit confused with the dates. We are celebrating in Romania Dragobete, which was our national day for Valentine's Day. But we don't anymore, because we celebrate Valentine's Day and we forgot that we had a celebration that was meant for the same occasion.
Oh boy.
So, yes, so this is kind of an outcome of globalization.
Today is our flag day.
Yeah, actually.
Really?
National flag day, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Great.
Mexico.
Why did we have classes?
You know, you celebrate the love for your flag, we celebrate the love for each other. So we remember February 24. So the main thing when interpreting an image is the context.
Yeah.
You know, I put those two images for you to think, what would a kid say about Mona Lisa? A kid of, I don't know, 2 or 3 years old. And what would a jellyfish say about the water that she sees for the first time? In order for you to understand that we interpret the pictures based on the context. And you did so on the previous slide. You deduced that the last one is meant for Romania. So the context is very important, and it explains, like in that picture showing San Diego and Tijuana cities, the hegemony, the hybridity, and binary opposition. Every image has a binary opposition. You have a contrast, be it in colors, be it in the message, in text, in, I don't know, it's very important. I picked up 2 pictures that its time. The first one is a lunch, and it was advertising in the 20s the skyscrapers in New York. And that one, I don't know if you know the story of that selfie.
Oscar?
I believe it's called
Yes,
the most
and,
famous selfie in the world.
Retweeted, the most retweeted one, and it was an advertising for a latest Samsung coming up. So it was a paid. Yes, it was.
Wow.
That's
Yes.
sad.
Yes, the point was that the selfie could receive a lot of faces because the mobile was big enough and the camera was very good. So, and it was retweeted millions and millions. So, you know, the context is fundamental when you interpret a picture. Because there might be pictures as the second one that you are not aware of or you don't know the story. So when, as I understand, you will be advertising things, when you will pick up a picture, you should bear in mind the context of that picture, its cultural outcomes, because you know, even if there is a global common culture that we share, each of us has its own identity. So, for example, if you advertise some eggs in Romania, the first thing we would think about is Easter, because we do them on Easter. So there are things that you should know about different cultures when you pick up different images. I don't know what happened there. Okay. So, what about this?
French Revolution, I believe.
You wouldn't know the author, it's Delacroix, and yes, it began very fashionable, and it was famous, and little by little it became to symbolize democracy and French Republic. And this lady, and it is also used in justice because it resembles that mythological figure of justice and balance. And it was revisited nowadays by
Springs?
Baron, yes. And it is called Liberty Guiding the People. It's a cult modern work. So for me, for instance, when I teach literature and other cultural stuff to my students, is to make them aware that nothing was created yesterday. That when you run into a concept, it is great to know its history and to see where does it come from, because otherwise you may think of it as an original modern art if you don't know history, and you will never interpret it as revisiting some historical notorious thing.
Yeah.
Yes, context is also important. This is Grand Castle in Romania.
Oh, it's the same.
It is associated with Dracula, though the historical character Vlad Tepes, from whom this myth came from, never lived in that castle. And just like Germans with their wall, we gave so many fights, Romanians, to say that Dracula isn't true, and it was a novel written by an English writer, and they don't exist, it isn't true. And at some point we understood that it could bring us money. So afterwards we embraced that myth. There is no foreigner visitor or tourist coming to Romania nowadays not looking and not asking, first of all, about Dracula. And at some point you just get tired saying every time, that's not true, but if you want to see the castle, we will
Just
show
okay.
you the castle.
Please stop.
Maybe for
And I don't know if you saw that animated movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's about Dracula that never existed, and this is the castle, and the idea of showing you this is to insist on this term hegemony in visual culture, and it is used in politics, it is used in visual media, it is used whenever you want to enforce your argument, and it can be seen. This is about hybridity in arts and in visual cultures, and there was particularly interesting because you have some global images there in a very traditional blue porcelain Chinese. Yes, you have a McDonald's, you have a KFC, different stuff, some beer or Coca-Cola, or I don't know, some cans. So for me, hybridity is more like a postmodern thing, because I teach literature and this is how we call it. But nowadays, hybridity is seen everywhere. You just melt things, mix things, and when it is made upon some very good knowledge of history and of culture, it is very beautiful, because you can put into it a lot of ideas. It's a little image that will tell you things about tradition, about national characters, about everything. And it is reduced in time, because we are speeding up and we never have time for anything. So, and there are so many images in the world nowadays. When you open your mobile, you just have tons of images. And the main point is to attract people from that very first image. So the battle is there. So if you could introduce in your picture something that would resonate with the person looking at it, you gain it. And then you can sell him whatever you want. And another term I was talking about in the beginning was binary opposition, and we can see it everywhere. In the first picture, in this one, you probably know the Chinese sign of yin and yang, which is the main idea of binary opposition in life. You have good
The opposite.
and bad, beautiful and ugly, so everything has another side. You should bear this in mind. Speaking about visual texts and this visual literacy that is very important for us. It's just like reading literacy, to understand images, to have this ability to read them, to write, to create them. And I have chosen some of the covers, and I don't know, something to show you that it is absolutely everywhere. When we were kids, we had images only in cartoons or maybe in some postcards, and we had some books, and that's it. You are living in a world full of images, and it is very important for you to know to interpret them. Because as new as it is, they are very, very old. So I have better images here. So this is a cave in Bulgaria, and you can see the ears down there, 6,000 litrons before Christ, so they are very, very old. And these are carved drawings in caves. So, you know, it's just like prehistoric memes, some messages that these ones are also very old, but more simple. There are just some hands. So if you think in terms of human being tradition, you would understand that we had this idea of putting our hands down long before Hollywood invented it. You know, it's very interesting to understand the history of things. And when you study different cultures, you'd be amazed to find a lot of similarities between cultures and people that never interacted with each other. So it depends on the human. These are some drawings from Somalia, some cows, and you see they are even more far away in time. These are other drawings, also very old. These are probably the most famous cave drawings in Lascaux. French had a very rich culture of drawings, which then turned to tapestries and canvas, and nowadays to comics that they call bande dessinée. So these are all related. After the caves, people moved to the buildings. The fresque in buildings. This is a very beautiful mosaic, and if you ever visit former Byzantine countries like Turkey or Romania, you would discover some mosaics very beautifully put together. And of course, this idea of drawing came to books as well. And this books from Middle Ages, and we call it incunabula paintings. I don't know how you say it in Spanish. In Romanian it would be the same word, incunabula. You may call them comics of Middle Ages. At first they were like this, and these are pictures that you can easily find in Orthodox churches. It's like stories told in picture. And if you go to a church in Romania, at a specific wall, you would find a painting with someone gifting the church to Christ, and that someone is the constructor, the ruler, the emperor, the person who ordered the construction of that church. Sănătate.
Oh.
We would say in Romanian sănătate. It's like health, be healthy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Salud here.
Yeah, here we say salud, which
Salud
means
in
health.
Spanish. Yeah.
So exactly the same.
Yeah.
Maybe also with the Sănătate.
Sănătate. How was it?
Sănătate.
Sanatate.
Sănătate?
Es como que te mejores.
Uh-huh.
It's related to health
Actually,
also.
there's another word in
It's
Spanish.
health.
Yeah.
It is health.
There's another word in Spanish called sana, which means to heal, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's very close to sanatate, so it's like
Yeah. Sanar is a verb to
to heal.
To heal. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we don't have, but we call sana a specific kind of milk.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so weird.
Yes.
It's another thing.
The words move very curiously from language to language.
Yes.
And even if they come from the same Latin root, they evolved in Spanish, in Italian, in French, in Romanian differently. So it's very interesting to compare that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
During the Renaissance period, so this 16th century in Europe, we won't have so many pictures. Well, we will have only the big letter at the beginning of the paragraph.
Oh yeah, the capital.
Yes, which is very well drawn. Those are also from the manuscripts of Middle Ages. I will skip that. This is something that you probably recognize. And I come to this term, anachronism. I had also the definition here, but I thought to introduce you with a meme, and I noticed that you looked directly to the image, so this is it. So anachronism is mainly something misplaced, something that doesn't belong to the context, whether in pictures, whether in literature, in culture in general. Anachronos, meaning back in time. The term comes from Greek, and it appears in 16th century. So we had Roman Great Empire in Europe, and then we had this 10th century period of Middle Ages. Something very sad and grey, and you know, there is no explanation. After such an evolution of humanity with Greek Empire, Roman Empire, we don't know where those Middle Ages came from. But after Constantinople was conquered by Ottomans and the Greeks ran from there to Europe, they brought with them a lot of Greek literature. So Europe, little by little, got reacquainted with that literature. And because parts of history were lost, they didn't know how to translate exactly those things because they were living in a feudal society, so they didn't know what is the democratic society of Greece. So they translated them as they could, creating thus anachronisms, things that didn't relate to that period at all. To show you something about anachronism, Marie Antoinette was the last empress of France, which saw the guillotine along with her husband, Ludwig XVI. So obviously, during the French Revolution in 1779, there were no Apples and no laptops. So this is anachronism that you can understand easily. Here you have, here you go, Mona Lisa with some headphones that was painted at the beginning of 14th century, Renaissance century by Leonardo da Vinci. And here you have another piece of art which is kind of changed to show you the presence of anachronism. And this one is probably the hardest one to recognize why it is an anachronism, and I put the images in different degrees so that you could understand that you need different level of knowledge in order to recognize anachronism. The point is that Braveheart was depicting the 13th century battles, and during the 13th century they didn't wear kilts. So it's anachronism because in that period they did not wear kilts. And here you have some last images of Aristotle. This is the original, and this is how he was seen in the Middle Ages in Europe. So he is very feudal and out of his time. He's dressed like the person who drew it knew that people dress.
He looks depressed, yeah. He looks depressed.
Yeah.
Well, he's very confused.
And the other one looks
And
like
he would probably ask, this is what I should wear? Really?
This is not me.
Yes. You know nothing about history. And these are some concepts to take away. I'm coming to my end.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
I have some other concepts. So visual culture studies recognizes the predominance of visual forms of any type, media, communication, information, postmodern world. If you show this image to your grandmother, she would probably understand nothing. Mine would have no clue what I want from her. But if we look at this, we understand a lot of things. For example, when I moved from one house to another and packed everything, my kids discovered some floppy disks. And they were like, what is this?
What is this?
Have you ever seen a floppy disk?
Yes.
Great for you. Mine hadn't. Mine didn't. So. Yes.
No, that's it.
one question that I would like to discuss with you. So she didn't.
No.
Great.
I didn't like recognize the name, but I know what it is. But I didn't recognize
Yes,
the name.
the black thing that we inserted in our computer.
Do you use?
No, but I recognize it.
No.
I know I didn't know the name, but I know what they are. Yeah.
I don't think there are computers nowadays that
No,
are
I don't think
suitable
so.
for that.
Or if you have an old one.
Yes, if you have an old one. The question is to think about the social media. Has it shifted a lot in the past 10 or 20 years compared to the past 50 years? Is something for you to think about, because we communicate nowadays quickly and very colorfully through different images. I'm in Romania, you live in Ticana. There is no distance because we have this mobile communication. And they are promising us that with the 5G, we'll have holograms and I'll be sitting at home and giving you lectures from there. So, everything changes very, very quickly. Yes, so you should think about it. Study of visual cultures merges popular and low cultural form medias with high culture. As in the picture I showed you, the revisiting of Delacroix, La Liberté. Delacroix is considered to be high culture because he is a classical painter. And this mixed in comics or in advertising. And this is something that you should think about when you mix things. What is the point? Why do you need that? Why should you use it? Visual cultures also intersects with the notion of media sphere and the study of media systems and anything we communicate through. So obviously it has touched every single area of interest nowadays. And when you create and put out images, you always should think about visual, about culture, and about system. Because it's like with the specialized language, I'm sure you have your own specialized language that probably your friends don't understand because they are studying other fields. When I explain specialized language, I teach legal English to my students. I always say to them that there is a vocabulary that we use at home that only our parents understand. So this is the most simple way to explain special languages. There are things that only some 2 or 3 of us relate to. Maybe some memories that we share, a laugh that happened in a specific context, and then when you say it again, only those who know would laugh. So all of that is very important when creating and when determining, analyzing the picture. We say that for translations, the best way is to translate authors that live in the same period with you because you relate to the same social contexts, and it's easier for you to understand and to translate it.
That makes sense.
The same is with pictures. When they are meant to be for your hometown, for a different country, for the target group of 60, 70 years old, and so on and so forth. Another thing to think about is that visual culture approach acknowledges the reality of living in a world of cross mediation. So our experiences of culturally meaningful visual content appears in multiple forms, and we should be aware of it. You know, the target group differs a lot. For example, when I start my course, this is my introductory course with my MA students, and if I ask them of images, they just don't pay any attention on images they see on their way to school, because they are thinking or they are reading a book, and you know, different people have different connections with images. Someone would pass through and never notice that there were a huge poster at the entrance of the university. Yes, it might happen.
What?
Sorry?
What?
It's okay.
Oh, no.
And it's a while. Because as graphic designers, our job is to make sure people notice those posters. So
This is why I'm telling you that there are people that don't, so you must be aware of them and find a way to, you know, like visually attract them. The poster might say, hey, don't pass by, look at me.
And you mentioned a key point to understand the target group.
Yes, it's very important. This is probably the first step.
Yeah, I told them every single day the most important thing in design is understand user and
Yes.
emotions and all the experiences and context around the user.
Yes, you must know whether it's female or male, young or old, and you know, I also translate a lot, and even when I do translation, I always ask for whom is the translation meant.
Exactly.
Because if it's a lawyer, he needs to know other things. If it's a text for pleasure, he needs to know other things. So it's depending on the answer, I focus on different kind of details when translating. And visual communication is like linguistic communication, like a simple dialogue. You know, when you talk to someone and you understand that he or she doesn't understand you at all, and you try to explain other things. And when creating images, you should think in the same framework, like communicating things. What do I want to transmit with the picture? What do I want to say? We learn codes for each form and code switch among the media and high and low culture. And I know that you talked about symbols and you know, deconstructing them and putting them in different contexts. They would give a total different meaning. Like, you know, the nowadays forbidden Nazi symbol.
Yeah.
It was used for hundreds of years in India and Egypt. It's a
Buddhism.
yes, it's a very old image that a symbol that had a very positive meaning.
Oh yeah.
But you see what history may due to a symbol like that. And no one would remember today that it meant someday something else. They would always relate it to
Nazi.
Second World War
Yeah.
and
The Nazi movement.
Nazi, exactly. And this is a book that I enjoyed and thought maybe to recommend it. It's about visual culture in general. And to finish up, I would like to get through once again with the purpose of visual art. It may be ceremonial, in rituals, I don't know, how we prepare for a wedding or for a funeral or
For a degree,
exactly celebration.
celebration.
Do you do the hat things?
Yeah.
Yes.
You do that. We also. But it's not something very Romanian. It's something very American, borrowed
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
From the American universities.
universities. But the students enjoy that very moment.
Yeah.
Yes. The purpose of visual art, of course, is as an artistic expression, as probably the main purpose of it. It also has a narrative, which is very important aspect of it. And it must be functional and persuasive when used in advertising and in marketing, and probably a lot today in politics. So